Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining this WARCnet afternoon keynote. So I'm honored to introduce Marta Severo, who's Professor of Information and Communication Sciences at the Université Paris-Nanterre. And Martha has been a leading figure in thinking about digital cultural heritage and digital methods for studying those. And her research focuses on action research in social sciences through web-based data. And in this, she focuses on two thematic areas. First, the collective construction of cultural heritage and memories on the web, as well as digital representations of place and space. So Martha is currently leading a large research project on the creation, documentation, and collaborative development of cultural and heritage, where they aim to examine the relationships between institutions and amateurs who are both shaping the definition and practice of preserving cultural heritage and knowledge. And what makes this project so interesting is the focus on cultural contribution platforms, as they call them, where anyone can contribute to the creation, documentation, and promotion of cultures and heritage. And I'm sure we'll hear more about that this afternoon. So I would also like to introduce you to collect any questions you may have about Marta's keynote or project in the chat, so I can post them afterwards. And if you would like to stay up to date on future events, we also have a WARCnet newsletter that you can subscribe to on our website, as well as an ongoing WARCnet challenge that you can also read more about on the website. And for now, I'm inviting Marta Severo to present her research. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, to be there, for the organizer for the invitation. I'm very happy to be with you virtually. I will be more happy to be with you physically, but it's not possible. So we will be missing coffee breaks and dinners, and I knew a lot of people there, so it's kind of sad. Anyway, I will present some research from the project that was introduced by Anne. I will try to share my screen, so the most difficult part is done. Let's try this. So, do you see my presentation? Yes, perfect. So, okay, I will start like Simone yesterday for some examples. This is an article was published by The Guardian in May 2020 during the lockdown, speaking about the importance of amateurs for building knowledge about archaeological sites in UK. Today, I speak another example, this based in France, because we have so many. Today, we discover participation. We discover participation on all sector, politics, economy, and so on, also in culture. And so we have this paper, this article was published in Le Monde in 2018. They are speaking about a project called One Day, One Soldier, where thousands of internet users have built a digital memorial. The article is about this website, an institutional website of the Ministry of the Army, where there was a collaborative platform for yes, this is the kind of example. They publish 1.5 million files of soldiers dead during the First World War, and they ask for volunteers for retranscribing some fields that were missing or there was no digitalized. So, which is the result? This is a capture screen from the Wayback Machine in June 2018 is after 3 years, actually all the files were annotated. We had more than 1.5 million annotation. So I discovered this from the article I showed you. So at the end of the story, I didn't know anything about this project after these amateurs during the project. So what I have done, I tried to understand the story. I meet this person that was the person that started all the project, Jean-Michel Gillot, and there was a genealogist, an amateur genealogist that motivated a lot of people through social media, through Twitter and Facebook. They organize several challenges related to specific events, some military events, celebration related to Tour de France. Actually, the result is as people to make several annotations every day to finish all this challenge. So anyway, not more. How we can do when discover something like this at the end? It's kind of frustrating because everything is already happened. So I had to build a kind of complex methodology to try to collect all data concerning this participation event, let's say like this. So I have very few information in the Wayback Machine because they have a website, but was just with few press release. They have the Ministry of Army was not publishing yet all the results as open data. I could access to data, but just a few one. So I decided to try with the archive of the INATEC, of the French Institute of Audiovisual Institute. I discovered they collected some data related to this hashtag One Day One Soldier. Actually were some tweets of journalists, not really related of. Anyway, I just to sum up, collecting all these different data. I also, thanks to the help of Frédéric Claver, that has some tweets collected, I could rebuild this story of this participation. And so what is the interest of this story? There is something, nothing new. I mean, what I want to tell you today is that in participation in cultural heritage is not something that we discover in the 21st century, even if we have several papers that tell us this, especially in newspaper. Why there is nothing new? Because most of you are historians, so I don't want to teach you what you know very well. But the armator was already existing in the 17th, 18th century, and we have before the armator, we have Cabinet de Curiosité, we have Wunderkammer, we have other people that today we call citizen, or today we call, yes, still armators that were participating to the system of art. They were contributing to the knowledge of the official knowledge. I will propose you 4 properties of the armator that we can find in the armator of the 18th century and that we can find also in the digital armator today. And these 5 properties will help us to understand the phenomenon of cultural participatory platform. The first one that often we forget is the relationship, the main one is the relationship with the institution. I mean, the armator in the Royal Society in France, in the Arcadia in Italy, was a person that was identified by the Royal Academy, by the institution of the time. It was a person that was identified in order to avoid that common people could access to the arts world. So there was a person that could help in distinguish what was art, was not art, and with an official role, but not the same role of the official institution of culture. The second property is that the armator is not just a figure related to taste. Often, also today, we think the armator as a passionate kind of, in a negative way, but actually the armator was a person who really expert. The collection was a way to show the art to other people, the competence he has on art. So it's something we don't have to forget. Then the third property is the relation with the artistic practice. The armator often is a drawer, is something that is someone that makes drawings, is someone that makes engraving, is really expert. And sometimes if we have publication, we have some controversies. If the person is an artist or not, or is just a copyist. There is not so easy to identify outside the border between professional and amateur. This phenomenon is something that we consider it's new. We have this with digital technology. Actually, it was already there in the 18th century. The first property is concern the relation to the others. I mean, the avatars that you see in this printing is a person really social. His competencies has to be recognized by the others, participating to the grand tour, they exchange with the letters. He needs that the other recognize his competence and give him a reputation. The last one that is most important for this talk is the relation to the space. The amateur has a room, usually in his house, where he shows his collection. And just some people can enter in this room when they have enough competencies to understand this art. Actually, there is often several rooms based on the level of competencies of people that can interact with them. So if we go now, we jump on the 21st century. Actually, we have a big difference is the medium, is the digital technologies, but all these 5 properties we can find today. It's just that sometimes we forgot some of them, and so we can interpret the phenomena as 2 different phenomena. The first thing is the relation with the institution. Actually, it's something that we often we reject because we have this concept of participatory culture that is very important, but sometimes the idea of participatory culture is kind of opposed of the idea of institutional culture. So we think that the amateur can be professional today. Pro-armor, we say, is someone that develop a competence outside the institution, but actually the institution needs these competencies. So ask for the help of this amateur for project as the one I mentioned at the beginning of this talk. Then the second one is the relationship with knowledge. Wikipedia and so many other projects show us how we need these competencies, how it's difficult to establish a border between the competencies of the professional and the amateur that is really expert of some topic. Third point, today the relationship with the practice is still very central, also because we don't have just the artists that publish music, critics, and so on, but we have the fan that can have a creative production, a contributive production at the same level of the artist. So this is still a central, and the creation is a central point of the art. The first one is the more obvious, but we know this about this platform, is the relation with the others. These people are contributing for showing, for interacting with the others, for participating in challenging, for building their reputations. So they always act in a collective context. And so the last one, the relation with space. Yes, the amateur, they need specific space. The specific spaces are the participatory platforms. But the problem of this idea is that today, when we think about participatory platform and the state of art about this topic, tend to oppose 2 different phenomena. And this opposition actually is not compatible with the 5 properties I show you, because they are the same amateur in the 2 types of platform. On one side, you have what we can call the amateur platform. So we have all the space that can be commercial platform, can be social media, can be also informal collective platform where people are expressing themselves, publishing every kind of creation. Normally, when we study this phenomenon, literature about this, scholars, they focus on just on the participants, or on how the platform is working, like recommendation today, we have a lot of this, but we don't consider how institutions can be related to this phenomenon. Institutions are outside, are not concerned. On the other side, we have something that is growing, is a more recent interest in the literature related to culture and cultural heritage, are what I call participatory cultural research. Is a phenomenon related to citizen science, are platforms that are created by institutions that you know very well, because they are mainly in libraries, but also museums, also directed in ministry, where the institution ask participants to carry out specific tasks that can help the institution to build, let's say, to carry out some research mission that can be digitalize some documents, can be retranscribe some documents, can be tagged, can be annotated. So this phenomena, why there is this opposition? Because this phenomena is arriving in the cultural sector quite late, because it's developed before in the hard sciences. This is a cover of Nature in 2010, where this title, People Power. Now this article speaks about how much can help today volunteers in research. And the idea is that the volunteers make quite basic tasks. They can install some software on their laptop to run some algorithm. They can choose, they can click, they can collect photos. It's quite basic task, not the same task that we have in the platform I show in the culture sector. So according to the state of art, we have two different phenomena. On one side, we have platform where people are are expressing themselves for their passion in their free time. They are looking for reputation or looking for interaction, sociability. And on the other side, we have space platforms that are created by institutions for building knowledge. And this knowledge is constituted by standardized data and also cultural heritage collection. So something that is kind of opposed to some free expression as in the participatory culture platform. But what happened today? I will try to share a video. Let's try. You see? Okay, so when we see this, this is the first video that Uffizi Gallery shared on his TikTok account. We have some problem to place this on this opposition. In general, we have some problem maybe with this video. Anyway, why? Because they use social media space, but they are an institution. So this is a kind of provocatory example, but it's just to show how it's not so easy to distinguish these two words. Another example, a very important one, was all the works of the Steve Museum initiative for using folksonomies. So a model of knowledge coming from participatory culture, from flick, from other space, and moving it in an institutional context. Another example on the other side, because the previous one are institutions, taking the example of social media and participatory culture, but we have also the other movement, because genealogists, for example, they have several platforms where they are practicing their personal interest, but actually for doing this, they are often annotating several documents, they are looking for documents, they participating in initiative of national local archives. So we have the opposite move. So my point is that today we have a problem with this concept of participatory platform in the cultural sector, because actually we have a problem with the term, the two terms, participation and platform. We are very complex terms. I don't want to redefine them, but I want just to point to some elements that contribute to the definition that can help us to understand the phenomenon of participatory platform. As regards participation, we tend to interpret this phenomena thinking just about the benefit for participants. It's something we do for the participant. Actually, today, this phenomenon has to be interpreted as being defined by Christopher Kelty as a two-way street. There is always something that is done for participants, but there is always something that is coming back to the organization, to the institution, or also to the technologies that are generating participation. We have always both. It is this interaction that makes participation interesting. As regards platform, you know very well, so I don't want to take so much time on this. Anyway, like 10 years ago now, Tartelon Gillespie made this article summarizing all the complexity, all the notion about participate platform. And the main point was that is not just a website, it's not just a specific entity, it's more complex than this, is an intermediary between actors, between services, but at the same time, this definition insists on the edges of a platform, insists on the fact that this is one entity, and so it can be sometimes complex to see inside, to decompose, to deconstruct the different spaces that we can have inside a same platform. So I will propose a kind of different definition, just that there's no pretension to be generalized, but it can be just useful to identify, to understand and study in web research, and I hope for you also in web archive research, the phenomenon of culture participatory platform in the cultural sector. Okay, this definition is based on three properties. The first one is the fact that these platforms are multi-space environment. As I will show you later, going back on the example of one day, one soldier, often, yes, we have, for example, the institutional platform, but when it is working, it's because amateurs can express themselves, organize themselves in other digital environment or physical environment. I don't focus about transmedia, but also transmedia is a key concept. So I just going back to a very basic concept of cross-media that sometimes, I don't say we forget, but we put on a side for this kind of phenomenon is very central. Today, when a project is working is because there we have different spaces where different actors that have different needs, they find their affordance that respond to their needs. If the amateur needs, I go back to the 5 properties, the amateur needs a space where can show his reputation, where he show his competencies. And often the institutional platform, even if there are big efforts, these are example working, they don't provide enough elements to define the identity, to show the expertise, to show the competencies, and also to play with the other people. On the other side, institution cannot needs standardized data, needs to show that is an institution, so needs an environment that is suitable for their needs. So we'd have to forget this idea that a platform is enough. Participation is working when there is a multi-space environment where we have different spaces. I call this because for platform is kind of confusing, where people can express themselves. The second point is that one of these space is working as a boundary space. Here I use the concept of boundary object of star, Susan Star. I apply it on, it's just on a question of object, it's really a question of space, a digital space where the different actors can be kind of they can find the properties that are suitable for their expression. So as I will show you later in Twitter, what's happened in the example I cited before, Twitter, the rules are established by the platform, established by Twitter. So the institution and the amateur, they are playing according to the same rules. The same rule of a short message, the same rule that they can publish image. So what's happened is that every participant to the challenge publish the same file on the institutional platform where he can put just some basic information. And then he published the same file on Twitter where he can add the photos of the document that where he found the information, and then he can put some more information about the personal life of the soldier, for example. But it's short one, and they have a very strong policy how they write. As I mean, we can imagine, the institution can imagine to build some regular expression to include the database, in the institution database, the information that are added by the amateur. I don't say they do this, but they could do this. The third element is the fact that this definition should help us to define, to reflect on what is born digital heritage. I mean, what is generating by this platform is not just a collection of cultural heritage. They are generating new collection. Actually, what they are archiving is the action of recognizing something as cultural heritage. What is happening is that there is not just a definition. We have different definitions in the different spaces. All these definitions are valid for the actors that are generating it. I will provide you an example. So for the same file, if I take the example of the platform, this is some example of what we find on the institutional platform. If we take a soldier in the institutional platform, we have a file, we have the retranscription of the file, we have specific information, and that's it. This is the writing we can find on Facebook. The Facebook for this project is really the space of the amateur, is the space of participatory culture. So we have often a story. The personal story of the soldier, we can often is a relative variety in them. We can have personal photo, we can have the photo of the cemetery, and it is combined with the official file of the institutional platform. So we have a different heritage. What is written in French, I forgot, sorry, to translate, is for each file, there is a man. We don't have to forget them. So we have a different aspect of the same file and also the same cultural heritage. This is Twitter. What we have in Twitter, we have a different affordance. So we have something that is written always as the same structure. So we have the hashtag 1G, 1P, no? 1 day, 1 soldier. Then we have the name. Then we have the job calculator, no? Of the person that we don't have in the file. Then we have the reason of the death, something that we cannot have in the official database because it's against the privacy rule of the French government. And then we have all the information we have in the file, the date of the dead, the place, the level of the soldier. So we have a different, and it is combined with this time with the documents, and not with the personal the face of the soldier or with the tomb. So we have 3 different images of the same information, this different way of presenting them. And in my view, all 3 have to be kept. All 3 are generating a newborn digital heritage related to a cultural heritage we have outside the digital space. So the problem, if we go back on your problem, that are the methodology, how we can build a methodology for studying this. Sadly, I have no big news to give you. So my answer is kind of paradox, is we need to build projects that are built to collect the data we need and to study the phenomena we want to study. I mean, in my case, I was very lucky to be able to collect a lot of information because there were personal collection already built and put together. But a different way to see the problem is that we can set like experiments for archiving different kind of information and for studying participation. So this with a colleague, Sarah Jamsburger, she's a contemporary historian, we built this project at the beginning of the lockdown in France. The project is called Windows in Lockdown. Actually, we built this also because we were kind of afraid to be at home for 2 months with our children. So we had this idea to invite people to go outside during the short time we could go outside and take photos of the public space. Our message was, if something happening in the public space, even if you are not there, and there are messages on the windows, there are messages on the shops, there are messages on the buildings. So we ask people to send us this message. So how we ask this? We built a kind of participatory platform because we have done as a researcher. Our messages was not just as amateur, but in a kind of research frame. So we have a cartography platform where everyone can post photos according to some field that we establish. And then we open Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, we open everything. And our hypothesis was that people and then we have the chance that INA, the French Institute for Audiovisual, accept to archive all tweets with our hashtag. So we hope that people use Twitter, and we think our hypothesis was that people should use Instagram because based on photos should work on this. And then we obviously hope they use our participatory platform. So what happened? We had a lot of participation considering there was no person working on it because we were at home with our children. We have a lot of friends helping. We had around 5,000 photos. See, this collection is still going on because we are locked down again. We have just 100 participants on the institutional platform and more 1,000 participants on Facebook. And we have very, very little participation on Twitter. A small one on Instagram, even if we have some advertising campaign. This just to give you a small idea. We had more than 2,600 publications in Facebook with almost 15,000 reactions. And we have an incredible participation around the world because we have 55 different countries, mostly in France and Italy, but also in other countries. So what are some very basic information, what are the most popular publications? As you can figure out, the most popular are related to humor and not really related to lockdown. What is written here is you have to keep your child by hand. If a child is found in the shop, it will sold to the circle. Here is the On the Route book. The unwritten text is yes, but no more than 1 kilometer. And then this on a school each child has to wait his parent on a cross. Anyway, and then we have a whole phase based on graffiti, a lot that we know was not asked, but it was very interesting. And then in different countries, in Italy, it was working in a completely different way because people were not able to publish just basic message. They published just message that was really related to humor or really emotional. And then we have all the production related to not really just mess on the shop. You know very well, I think. And then according to changing the phenomenon, we have also different kind of image. So after all this, our problem as researchers, what we do with all this is so we start to build a quite traditional web archive based on WARCnet is a database where we collect all this photo. And we have a very we publish it at the end of the month. We have a very complex structure of metadata in order to use this information that is inside photo, because the objective is to open to everyone this database. So at the end, we have our research question on this project, but I don't focus on it. I want to focus on what we can conclude from this experience. I have two main points. One is really that even when in the two examples, we see that looking just in the institutional platform or on social media, if really our object is participation, we have to consider the circulation of participants around spaces. And so we need to follow actors where they are, and we need to understand where they are really able to exchange, to interact. And so we need very, very complex methods to do this, sadly. And the second main finding for me is that even if we define some policy for web archiving, hoping that are working based on what we have studied, actually user can have very different behavior instead what we have forecast. So this is the main challenge, because behavior changes, especially where they are expressing, how they are expressing themselves, they are changing. So what we do, I mean, maybe the problem is that it's normal, we lose information, it's normal. So maybe we have studied the study participation, online participation, ongoing participation, and then we have other study where we have an historical perspective that where some information that's lost, but we have other information that we can have because we have a diachronic perspective. So I think the web archiving policy can hardly forecast all user behavior and change it, at least in the complex perspective that won't take in account participation challenge. So at the end, I provide you more challenges than answer. Yes, I finish like this. I'm available for your question. No. I will try to. Okay.
I think poor Anne, her doorbell has rang at precisely the right moment. So thank you very much indeed, Marta, for a fantastic presentation.
Okay. I can go on. Huh?
Yeah, perhaps we can start with the question waiting for Anne. It's really difficult, but I may ask the questions that came during your presentation, Marta, and so on. We'll have time to come back and then to continue our sharing. But so thank you so much for your talk first, for this link to the current situation with this very interesting initiative dedicated to the Vitrine en Confinement, which is also linking, the materialities and the world outside with our digital lives. But my first question was about gender. You know, I noticed all these white men on the old pictures, and of course, women. They were also there probably in the past, and also writing letters, having salon littéraire and so on, but probably they entered a bit more the amateur culture thanks to the digital world. So I would like to know if you may develop a bit about this question of gender, and notably regarding the Un jour un poilu. Are there a lot of women who are interested in contributing to this kind of challenge and collective work?
It's a very interesting point. I didn't focus yet on this, but it's a really interesting issue, because actually in the windows in lockdown, we have recently, starting from the phase 2, after the déconfinement, we had a lot of production of feminists. They have published collage, or they have published street art, and they built some expression related to lockdown to express themselves. It is true that in a lot of projects, we cannot generalize, because, for example, Testament des Poids Lourds is a project of National Archives in France. Most participants are women, but there is some context like genealogists where still are all men. But yes, something that can be more investigated. It's an interesting point.
Well, thank you so much, Valerie, for opening up the discussion. So the next question is also, if I can pose a short question, regarding your question about methodology, because you indeed point out how this also kind of creates a methodological problem for us, right? We have these two different approaches. On the one hand, the first project you showed was kind of like maybe a top-down approach, right, to soliciting amateurs, where maybe the institution was imposing this hashtag, right, of the one soldier per day, right? So it's a hashtag you can follow. But what if there's like a more of an emergent phenomenon from the amateurs themselves? Like what kind of boundary spaces or boundary objects besides hashtag could we possibly use to locate these spaces of participation and possibly also archive them?
Yeah, maybe it was not clear. The hashtag was created by the amateur. I present very quickly. Actually, the institution doesn't recognize the role of the amateur in this project. It's kind of specific institution because it's the army. So it's not a library, but no, it's completely bottom up in this sense. I mean, you have a top-down platform. At the same time, you have a completely bottom-up initiative where the hashtag has been created by this person. What is interesting is coming back also the gender question. This person have done this because he was unemployed and he wants to show his competencies as a community manager. It's kind of interesting phenomenon. No, this is really, usually you use, you have institutions that promote hashtag. Here what is interesting is from the bottom, and just the webmaster of the institution use it, not the institution account, just the webmaster as a personal, as a person use this hashtag on Twitter. The institution never use it. So it's completely separated, even if in official events, they invite some people because they understand the role, but they don't thanks them even at the end, they don't thank them in the press release, just to say.
So I think this also nicely connects to the question that was posted in the chat by Suzanne Asman, who wonders actually also about these collaborations between amateurs and archivists. Because she states amateur or popular archives create their own fan-based collections. As a result, we have this multitude of personal cultural canons. But also, so I think she's also wondering whether there are successful collaborations between these institutions and amateurs, because indeed, as you point out, the example, it was an institution, but it was supplemented maybe in an emergent manner by these amateurs. But do you know of any examples that successfully combine the two?
Actually, no, there are not so many today examples that combine two. Maybe the answer because why this, because we have a successful institutional project where we have a few people that contribute a lot. This is the structure, usually very few people that contribute because they accept the rules of the institution. And then on the opposite, we have all these production. So maybe we need to keep both. Maybe, I mean, for me, the only possibility is that I know a project, there are some projects that are based on Wikipedia. There are some projects, no? If you take some projects in Wikipedia are built by institution, no? We have several projects in this context, also Wikisource, you have projects there where there are some rules. The rules are not established by institution, are established by a collective of people. And there you have a lot of production in a kind of free environment produced by the institution, for the institution, but the institution accept the rule of Wikipedia for doing this. So it's a kind of, this is a kind of successful story, I would say.
I think maybe this also answers, I don't know, Anat Ben David's question about how and where to place the Internet Archive and Wikipedia, which you just mentioned, in this dichotomy that you previously set out. Also because, for example, the Internet Archive is now soliciting external contributions, for example, with the Save Page Now. So it's also kind of like mixing up these modes and how to account for these institutions or amateurs that aim to do both. Like, how do they fit in the dichotomy that you discussed?
Yeah, because the problem is, the next problem is, okay, we ask people, we have answers. So with Wikipedia, we have contribution. But then in the project I have studied, the problem is how the institution can incorporate this knowledge in the institutional knowledge. Is it because if the project is created by the institution, we expect that the institution will include this new knowledge that is generated, for example, in Wikipedia. For example, in a project that I study in France, what is happening is that actually what is generated doesn't correspond to expectation. So I think we are in an intermediary phase. I think there will be arrangement that will be done, but now we are on this second step, how to put inside, going back to the institution.
So I know Niels also had an example about an amateur project, or otherwise we have 8 more minutes also for questions.
Very briefly, it's an example of an amateur web archivist, namely myself. That's my way into web archiving, because I just started doing it way back in 2000, in the year 2000. Started archiving the web myself. I did that for 1 or 2 years actually, and that was based on my own interest. What was my interest? As you can see on my picture, my city Aarhus is behind me, and one of my first collections was websites related to the city. And at the time, there were no national web archive in Denmark, but when they then were established in 2005, I asked them if they would like to receive my old collection of old web. And it took some years actually until they found out if they wanted or did not want to. And then they finally got my hard drive with all this stuff. And it took a lot of years until they found out how to put it into the collection in a way. But now it's sitting there and it's part of the National Web Archive, I guess. The thing is, then I have to apply for getting access to it. But that's another story.
So can I ask one more question about the TikTok example? So that was from an institution, right? From a French museum.
Italian one.
Yeah, I was wondering to what extent that was kind of an invitation to amateurs on the TikTok platform to contribute, maybe kind of to remixing, you know, because we're kind of back into this participatory user-generated content space, you know, with the also the relationship between the amateur and the professional. So I was wondering to what extent these musea then also play with this, you know, with this role of them enticing these amateurs, for example, to create these mimetic types of content on TikTok, and whether you see this example that you showed as a kind of invitation for these amateurs.
It would be very good, but I think they are just building a community management policy, because the next step was inviting Chiara Ferragni to visit during the night. So anyway, we have other museums doing this. I think this policy of this museum is just to attracting media attention. Anyway, they have 2,000 comments, so it's a kind of participation. But yeah, we have other museums, especially during lockdown, no, I don't remember the hashtag, no, for reproducing picture of important famous picture. Is a kind of I look for a lot for documents of institution on TikTok, so I don't find a lot of other museums are there yet. Maybe it's not the good place for participation.
Yeah. Great, thanks. So I have a comment that's kind of guised as a question from Sally, who wonders how your participatory work could interlink with post-custodial archival theory from the 1980s. And maybe if you're like, what is a theory? We can ask Sally to elaborate on it.
Well, I was doing this project, so thank you very much for your fascinating talk. I was doing some work around participatory, and somebody came up with this idea that it was post-custodial, and I was quite surprised when I looked at it, because this is from the 1980s. And if I understand correctly, if the archivist is the custodian of the archive, if we move beyond that, so it's sort of looking at authority and things, and I just think it could be interesting to sort of decentralize. I mean, you're doing a lot with space and multiple spaces, but decentralize the role of the archivist, and I think in some ways that's what you're doing with the participatory approach. But it was interesting that there was this idea in a slightly different context in the 80s. So I just wondered if you have any thoughts on that.
I didn't know it, but I will investigate more this phenomenon, because actually, yes, my really discovery was all the sociability. What was more interesting for me in the 80s was the social aspect that is not really mediated. So I think we have a lot to learn what we was already studied. Then we have the road, the enlightenment that make us to forget some important move in the sector of art that can help to understand what is happening today. Thank you for the input.
So maybe this is also a nice way to end, I think, with maybe having the final 2 minutes if there are any kind of like announcements that need to be made. But otherwise, I would really like to thank Marta for this wonderful presentation and for introducing your new research. So small applause for Marta. So thank you so much. And I'm just briefly looking at Niels if he has any final announcements.
No, just thank you from me as well, Marta. Really great lecture. So no further comments. Yeah, maybe just mentioning that this keynote you can find it online, hopefully already later tonight on the website. But apart from that, no other messages.
So thank you all. Thank you, Marta. Thank you, organizers, and have a very good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. And